Hello, I'm Patrick Stewart, star of TV's Star Trek: The Next Generation, and the host of the documentary series MGM, When the Lion Roars.
The success of Oblivion Remastered has led to much speculation about a possible remaster of Oblivion's predecessor, Morrowind. In this video, I'm going to tell you why that would be a terrible idea.
Yet, rifle is fine!
The technological leap from Oblivion to Skyrim was not that far. Both games were released during the same console generation, after all. Aside from the horrible level scaling, Oblivion's systems didn't need that much tweaking to make the game more accessible to the modern console gamer. The gap between Morrowind and Oblivion, however, was much greater, not just technologically but conceptually as well. The original Elder Scrolls games, Morrowind included, were inspired by games most Skyrim players have never even heard of, with game mechanics that stress the fact that you are not playing the game directly, but are emulating the role of a character with their own strengths and weaknesses within the lore of the game's world. Wow, I can pick my own class? An axe-wielding barbarian sounds pretty good. Well, would you look at that? An iron dagger. But seriously, how many players have gone through this exact sequence of events? Morrowind was released at the tail end of an era in gaming that had different assumptions about player literacy and attention span. The game expects you to carefully read your journal and what NPCs have to say to figure out where to go and what to do next. Quest lines of opposing factions often conflict with each other, forcing the player to make choices about which factions they want to commit to. Everything in Morrowind's world has a believable reason for existing, both within the setting of Vvardenfell and the internal logic of the Elder Scrolls lore itself. The political intrigue and scheming that results from all this is a huge part of what makes Morrowind's game world so endlessly fascinating. Oblivion, on the other hand, became the blueprint for the now all too familiar Bethesda game formula. Turn your brain off, follow the quest marker, and smash the Beatles.
Smurf them! Go! Go! Go!
In Oblivion, NPCs that Bethesda deems too important are no longer killable.
Nope.
Factions are now all-inclusive, and no longer require the player to have specific skill sets to advance in them. New factions like Manimarco's Necromancers and the Blackwood Company are not joinable at all, because that would conflict with the Mages Guild and Fighters Guild questlines.
Look at this dude.
The removal of consequences for the player's actions meant the player no longer had any recognizable impact on the game world. You can be the hero of Kvatch, and nobody gives a Vec.
It's you, the hero of Kvatch. This is truly an honor. It's all over, lawbreaker.
You can literally become a Daedric prince, and it means nothing.
Nothing!
Thanks to Oblivion, this kind of hand-holding is unfortunately what many people have come to expect from a modern Elder Scrolls game, although apparently even Oblivion can be too overwhelming for some. A Morrowind remaster would have to be made in this style in order to be commercially successful. Even Oblivion was deemed too slow and boring for the modern console gamer by the remaster developers, who increased the remaster's leveling speed, turned the fatigue stat into a sprinting bar like in Skyrim, and added health regeneration. When people say Morrowind is too old or too clunky, they don't just mean technologically, they mean how the game world and its systems are designed from the ground up, not to revolve around the player. Streamlining and simplifying Morrowind in this way would ruin Morrowind's identity and the depth and complexity of its world. But all of this is only scratching the surface of why I think a Morrowind remaster would be awful. Not too long ago, a major expansion dropped for one of the greatest modding projects in gaming history. If you're an active Morrowind player, you already know what I'm talking about. Despite the name, the base game of the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind only features the island of Vvardenfell, a relatively small portion of the land of Morrowind as a whole. Enter Tamreel Rebuild, a massive undertaking that aims to complete the mainland of Morrowind as if it had always been part of the original game. In fact, it's even better than that. I know I'm not alone when I say the quality of Tamriel Rebuild's new lands and quests is often above and beyond what the base game itself offers. This is to say nothing of the sheer breadth of Tamriel Rebuild. It has a bigger world map and more quests than both Oblivion and Skyrim combined, and that was before the new expansion. Tamriel Rebuild's biggest expansion ever, titled Grasping Fortune, includes a whopping 270 new quests, thousands of new NPCs, and many new cities and towns in Morrowind's southwestern region, including Narcissus, which is probably the biggest city ever rendered in a 3D Elder Scrolls game. The sheer scale of Tamriel Rebuild, and the fact it's a free mod, honestly blows my mind. And then there's Project Tamriel, which currently adds 2 huge areas of Cyrodiil and Skyrim to explore, both offering about 30 to 40 hours of gameplay each, with quests and cities that are just as high quality as those found in Tamriel Rebuilt. It's almost impossible to see and do everything on a single character in vanilla Morrowind. It's doable, but only for the most dedicated of players. To see and do everything in Tamriel Rebuilt would take hundreds and hundreds of hours. The replay value is insane. For many of us Morrow boomers, Tamriel Rebuilt is one of the main reasons we continue to play Morrowind these days. In some ways, Tamriel Rebuilt has become Morrowind. I've spent hundreds of hours exploring and questing in the mainland already, and Skyrim and Cyrodiil, and I barely feel like I've scratched the surface. At this point, a Morrowind without Tamriel Rebuilt is unimaginable, which is exactly what any official remaster of Morrowind would be. Tamriel Rebuilt is not official canon. It's based on its own interpretation of Morrowind-era lore, and directly conflicts with the versions of Tamriel depicted in the later Elder Scrolls games. This is perhaps the best thing about Tamriel Rebuilt. It compromises on nothing to bring to life a vision of Tamriel consistent with the level of world building in vanilla Morrowind itself. Did you know there are many more races in Tamriel beyond just the 10 portrayed in the mainline series? A huge problem with the world building of post-Morrowind Elder Scrolls games, especially Oblivion, is that they do nothing to innovate or expand on the world that was established by Morrowind and Daggerfall. The only new lore Oblivion brings to the table is the end of the Septim dynasty and the closing of the Third Era, while Skyrim features a rather bizarre storyline where the Nords are rebelling against the Empire so they can continue worshipping an imperial god.
What?
The Empire, as depicted in Morrowind, like the real Roman Empire, is only governed by Cyrodiil indirectly. Aside from a few colonies like Pelagid and Ebonheart, the imperial government actually has very little visibility in Morrowind, especially in the Far East. This would be true even in Cyrodiil itself. As the seat of the Empire, its society should be at least as multi-layered and complex as the other provinces under its control, and it was, at least in Morrowind's lore, until Oblivion came along and flattened everything and turned Cyrodiil into Disneyland. Take the city of Anvil. In Oblivion, it's ruled by a countess. Just a countess. There are no dukes in this world apparently, no kings, almost no nobility to speak of. Are we really supposed to believe a lowly countess answers directly to the emperor himself? Who are the major powers here? What's the countess's political agenda? What's her tax policy? In Project Cyrodiil, Anvil is reimagined as a sort of Renaissance merchant kingdom with its own internal court politics and a main storyline centered around a potential succession crisis. This isn't just flavor, it makes the setting believable. Can anyone tell me why Breville is poor? An actual in-game source?
I've literally hurt my brain thinking about this one.
The book Guide to Breville tells us that Breville is poor, but it doesn't tell us why it's poor. Breville is on the Niben River, a major trading route in and out of Cyrodiil City. In real history, cities on rivers with access to large trade networks like this tend to do very well, plus it's sitting right between the borders of Elsewhere and Blackmarsh. So how do we explain the level of poverty we see in Breville? Alright, according to Reddit Mental Gymnastics, Breville is poor because merchants and traders just pass it by on the way to the capital, like how in real life Lyon is poor because its river leads straight to Paris.
Oops!
This kind of thoughtless world building pervades Oblivion to a much worse extent than even Skyrim. It makes the game so uninteresting to me, and it's why even as a massive Elder Scrolls fan, I've barely touched it since it originally released.
But it's got good epic fantasy demon stuff at the end, which I think the kids like.
Meanwhile, in Project Cyrodiil, Anvil is a wealthy city that actually explains why it's wealthy. You can read overly detailed in-game books about the history of the region, tour the offices of its many different trading companies, and even enter Anvil's stock market, with stocks that rise and fall in value based on the outcome of quests you do. This is what Morrowind does best. making the world feel like a living, breathing place with different factions vying for control of the land. Everything that exists for a reason, down to the Daedric gobbledygook on a Morag Tong assassin's outfit. Project Tamriel takes this idea and arguably realizes it to a greater extent than even the base game. If you're an Elder Scrolls lore nerd, or just someone who appreciates good world building, all of this is a dream come true. But enough gushing about Tamreel Rebuild. I've made several videos about OpenMW on my channel in the past, so I won't linger too long on it. Here is the Morrowind remaster I always wanted. The original experience on modern PCs, bug-free, crash-free, and with extended modding capabilities. You know that feeling when you install 2000 mods for Skyrim, and it hasn't crashed in a couple of hours, but you're constantly aware that it might crash? You don't get that with OpenMW.
All of this just...
Shut your fucking mouth!
Between Tamriel Rebuilt and OpenMW, modders have taken Morrowind into their own hands in a way that even Skyrim could never dream of. Thanks to these two projects, Morrowind has become a living, community-driven framework for the Tamriel we were once promised, but which Oblivion and Skyrim failed to deliver. Should Morrowind be officially remastered in the style of the Oblivion remaster, it would not only be an extremely watered-down version of Morrowind, it would be a tiny slice of an extremely watered-down version of Morrowind. So on the question of a Morrowind remaster, let's all say together,
Oh, I know this one. No thank you.